I think Spider-Man 2 represents the very peak of the commercial and critical success of Spider-Man, at least on the big screen. The film built upon the formidable first entry in the series and was even more popular and turned an even greater box office. This popularity probably worked against the sequel, Spider-Man 3, as expectations were set very high that sadly weren't met, or at least that seems to be the common interpretation. And I think for a lot of fans, a lot of people look back with great fondness and affection for this film and this time in Spider-Man history. Now, oddly, Spider-Man 2 didn't have a huge toy line to support it. There were a few figures from Toy Biz in the 6-inch range, but not as expansive as it had been for the first film. The line seemed to consist mostly of Spider-Man variants, but to be fair, there was a considerable upturn in quality. There was an increased amount of articulation and detailing, and was very much in keeping with what we expect from a Marvel Legends figure. They also dabbled with a 12-inch scale, including a couple of twin packs with Spider-Man and Doc Ock and Mary Jane. But amongst this, they released this special curiosity, and this is what I want to talk about today, because this is the quarter scale or 18-inch tall Spider-Man figure. And this, for all intents and purposes, is a scaled up Marvel Legends figure with articulation that I don't think I've ever seen replicated before or since. Now, the packaging itself isn't too imaginative. It is basically just a cityscape with a yellow filter over it, and it is quite a garish colour scheme they've gone with. This is super bright, but, you know, I do like colourful, so I can't fault it for that, really. But it is quite simple in terms of its packaging, and really, apart from that wonderful window display where we can see the action figure on full display there in this gigantic box, you can see really what they're pushing here is the level of articulation. 67 points of articulation, which is incredible, and obviously they are displaying every possible pose you can put Spider-Man in on the packaging here, which is, you know, fantastic. And here he is out of that packaging. I have to say I have a great fondness and affection for this figure. He's been with me a very, very long time, and he's always been incredibly impressive. So he stands incredibly tall. He's also very, very weighty as well. Like, this is a very solid figure that you have in your hands. Like, there's no danger of him falling apart or feeling like anything's going to snap off. He's really solid. And I have to say the sculpt they've gone with is fantastic, because yes, it's based on Spider-Man 2, but actually it looks more like the way that Mark Bagley or even Todd McFarlane might draw Spider-Man. He's very muscled, as he's got a lot more sinews, and generally just has a lot more definition going on than we see in movie costume, because of course it's heightened. So for me, this sculpt, it's kind of like a perfect blend of the two worlds, really. You've got your movie costume, but on a comic book version of Spider-Man. The other fantastic thing I love about this sculpt is, of course, all the details in the costume. So as I said, it is based on the Spider-Man 2 costume, which of course has the raised webbing and that sort of armour-looking kind of effect, that chainmail effect going on, for lack of a better description. But, you know, they've sculpted that in. That is part of the sculpt. It's not just painted on. And then they've done a fantastic job of actually painting it. But crucially, I just love how they've sculpted in the spider logo on the chest there. It looks brilliant, and of course it goes over that divide there as well into his ab crunch, which, you know, to me, it looks fantastic. I think they've done an amazing job of this. And again, on the reverse, we have the red spider logo, which is just really vibrant and huge. And again, it just goes over those lines, those overlapping joints. And it's been very carefully thought out so that no matter how you position him, it looks in proportion, it looks right and doesn't look silly. I love this. I think it looks fantastic. I'm not going to talk too much about likeness today because obviously it's a guy in a mask. But clearly, they've based the design on Spider-Man 2. If you look at the eye to head ratio, you can see those big eyes there. Pretty much perfect to what we see on screen. But I think they're actually shaped a little bit more than they appear on screen. And I think the whole head shape isn't really trying to replicate Tobey Maguire's head shape. This again just reinforces that idea that this is kind of a comic book Spider-Man that we're seeing, but in the Spider-Man 2 costume. Okay, so clearly the articulation on this figure is insane, so let's dive in. He does have a ball joint in the head which allows him to look up and down, spin right the way around, but there is also a ball joint in the neck, which again replicates the same movement. It allows it to move up and down, and it will also swivel from side to side. This is absolutely fantastic. I mean, this presents so many opportunities for posability. It's just incredible. Likewise, in the shoulder, we have that swivel there that allows the arm to push out and backwards, which is incredible. That's then complemented by a ball-jointed shoulder, And there's also a bicep swivel as well. So again, we're seeing huge amounts of potential for articulation and dynamic poses here. This is incredible. This is like they're throwing everything at this figure. He's then got double jointed elbows, which click nice and strongly into place. So again, there's no danger of these just like tearing off or the pin coming out. They click very reassuringly into place. He's then also got a swivel just below the wrist, which is fantastic, and he's got a hinge on the wrist as well, so his hand can obviously arch inwards and out. But my absolute favourite articulation on this figure is the fingers. This is incredible. Every digit has a point of articulation, so you can do pretty much whatever you want with his hands there. You can stretch them out into a high five, or you can curl them into a fist. He's also got an opposable thumb. I love this. So not only is it in the digits, but it's actually in the base of the thumb as well. So that can arch inwards and out, which is just amazing. But the fun doesn't stop there, because he also has articulation in the chest. And as you can see, he can swivel from side to side here, which is absolutely incredible. I love this. It again allows for so many different poses you want, but he can also be spun as well. So it's not just side to side, it's actually rotating, which is absolutely fantastic. On top of this, he's also got an ab crunch, which is incredible, and again has a huge range of motion here, so you can bend him right the way over and a fair distance backwards as well. On top of that, he's then got a waist swivel as well, which will allow him to spin all the way around if you want to, so it doesn't get much better than this. He's got an upper thigh swivel, and this comes off the ball-jointed hips. Now, this ball-jointed hip can be controversial in some circles because it can look pretty unsightly, but here it actually works fine. Like, it's not distracting at all, and it allows for great posability. Again, he can stretch his legs all the way out. You can get him to the splits if you want. He can kick his legs forwards all the way and back all the way. Pretty solid. This is then complemented by a double-jointed knee, so again, he can get his leg right the way back there, which is fantastic. And then his foot, he has the ankle rockers and the pivot as well, which is fantastic. So his feet will move from side to side, but they'll also hinge forwards and backwards. And then last but not least, he also has toe articulation in two places. So he's got the upper toe and the lower part of the toe. Each has its own hinge, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, to give you a sense of scale, he is of course 18 inches, or the 1/4 scale, so of course when you put him next to a 6-inch Marvel Legends, you can definitely see the difference here, and yeah, how they don't compare really. Here he is next to a bath. In this case, this was the Wendigo Build-A-Figure from a couple of years ago. Again, obviously Wendigo is fairly tall, but yeah, only just gets above the knee on this figure. Here he is with the 7-inch scale, so this of course is an alien from NECA. And finally, here he is with a 1/6 scale figure, so I've chosen the Goldfinger Sean Connery James Bond from Sideshow Collectibles, and again you can see obviously that there's just a huge difference in height. Now, I think that's probably one of the weaknesses of this figure, and I love this figure to bits, but it is a bit lonely because there are no others that can really join him. Now, I know there have been a few more quarter scales released in recent years. People like NECA have produced some comic book heroes in this format and scale, but there aren't a great many. So until this line increases, or they produce a few more characters in this line, for now Spider-Man's going to be pretty solitary on display. So final thoughts? Well, I've actually got a few here. First of all, I think this is a fantastic figure. I don't think I've ever seen a figure with as many points of articulation, certainly not in this scale. 67 points is impressive, and yeah, definitely puts a lot of other Marvel Legends to shame. I haven't shown this in the video because I seem to have misplaced mine, but he also comes with an extra feature, which is a strap-on web shooter that actually has a firing mechanism as well. And it came with two types of webs: that sort of solid hard web that could act as a projectile and hit other figures in the face if you wanted, or an open web so it looks like it's splatting against the wall, which is pretty cool. I think he's bright, he's colourful, I think the mould is pretty much perfect. I really can't think of many things to fault this figure. In fact, I can't think of one. I've loved this figure for many years. He's always been with me. I've carried him around from wherever I've been in life. He's come along for the ride. He's just a really fun guy to have around, to be honest. He is, because he's got all that articulation. You can, imagine you can have some fun with hand gestures and things like that. He's kind of, it's just a fun toy to have around the house. Like, he's brilliant, and he's of that scale as well, which makes him pretty much centre of attention wherever he is. And this got me thinking about HasLab and some of the Marvel Legends figures that are coming out of that. For those of you who haven't seen my Sentinel figure, I do a size comparison using this Spider-Man. Of course, the Sentinel towers above him yet again, because he's about 26 inches tall. But it got me thinking that actually, its articulation isn't as good as what we see here. It certainly doesn't have the 67 points of articulation that we see in Spider-Man. There's an awful lot. It's got them in the fingers, but it doesn't have everything that Spidey has right here. And then that kind of triggered another thought in me, which was, well, the Sentinel was very, very expensive. He really was. And yes, he comes with a whole host of extras and, a very fancy presentation box and, a couple of extra figures as well to boot. So he's not light on extras, and I'm not saying he's bad value for money. But, however, you compare him against this Spider-Man figure, which was released, many, many years ago at mass retail. He's not that much smaller, and he has the same level of attention and care and love that's gone into this figure, and he was pretty cheap. He was not super expensive to buy. In fact, I think I got him on discount for a very, very affordable price, which is incredible to think all these years later, because I'm pretty sure if HasLab was to produce this Spider-Man now, that he would have a hefty price tag. So if you can find this guy in the secondary market and you haven't already got your own, then I heartily recommend that you track him down, because he is absolutely fantastic. My only advice would be that if you don't have any space, you better make some, because he takes up a lot of it, and yeah, you're not going to want to leave him in his packaging very long. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.